Okay. Are we seeing the slides? We're good? Great. Okay, so I'm going to introduce myself first. My name is Orit. I am the HR manager at Israel Tech Challenge, which I'll speak to you about in a bit. I came to Israel 7 years ago from Canada. I made Aliyah. I was raised in an Israeli home, but still made Aliyah, born and raised in Canada. And I came to study organizational psychology. So I pursued my master's at the Technion here at Haifa. So it's the study of businesses, organizations, the various issues that take place there, whether it's group dynamics, managerial issues, et cetera, with the aim of trying to solve them. And after my studies, I worked in HR in very diverse settings. So in Amdocs and Elbit, if you guys are familiar, in the Diamond Exchange. And I really interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people, accepted over 200 people to jobs. And each of these companies had a very different type of interview. So the Diamond Exchange, for example, included polygraphs and graphologies. So I got exposed to a lot. And all this to say is that my exposure to many people kind of led me to see a lot, to experience a lot. I don't want to say that I've seen it all because I'm still surprised by people sometimes. But I'm here today to give you an insider's insight on how to interview properly, on what we're really looking for in candidates. And I think maybe a lot of the things that I might tell you today might seem intuitive, but at the end of the day, I do see common mistakes that are repeated over and over. So hopefully this will shed light on them and will lead you to do differently once you approach your job search. I'd like to say a couple of words about the organization that I work for. It's called Israel Tech Challenge, or ITC. It's also a Masa program. We're a nonprofit that belongs to the Jewish Agency. And what we do is we train academics either from STEM fields or general fields as well to become developers, software developers. There's a shortage of about 10,000 developers in Israel. I'm talking about skilled developers. And so we have several programs. We have a full stack development program, a cybersecurity program, a data science program, and our training model is based on the IDF's 8200 intelligence unit. So it's a unit where they train the soldiers extremely quickly, quite intensively, and then they throw them into the water and let them gain hands-on experience. So we devise our training together with the high-tech industry. The training happens on our campus, and then we find our students projects in the high-tech industry, which often end up turning into full-time jobs. So if any of you are interested in learning more, you can always email us at info@itc.tech. Okay, so on to our menu for today. We're gonna talk about several things. The first is about knowing your story before approaching the job search, okay? Having a direct target in mind and knowing how to convey that to the interviewer. We're going to talk about what I think the secret recipe is to the ideal candidate, about personal branding, and then we'll get into the specifics, how to construct your CV, what we're really looking for in there, about fit, trying to find that fit between yourself and a company, and then the various interviews that you might encounter during your search. The phone interview, the face-to-face, there are various face-to-face interviews, what each of them mean, what each of them are looking for you to behave in a certain way, etc. We'll talk about the psychology of interviews as well and the questions. A lot of the times we're very concerned about how to answer questions correctly in an interview, but we don't ask ourselves, wait a minute, what is the interviewer tapping into? Why are they asking me this question? And then finally, we'll talk about navigating the Israeli cultural gap. I'm assuming a lot of you are from very diverse countries and backgrounds. And the mentality here, especially the interviewing mentality, is extremely different than what you perhaps have experienced back at home. I want to say a couple of words about Corona, because this is something that a lot of people have been asking me about, and it's the big elephant in the room, so we can't ignore it. I know that we're slowly trying to get back to normal, which is obviously going to be a new normal. A lot of people have been asking me, is it going to be hard to find a job? Is it nearly impossible now? There are many people who are unemployed, and before this, we know that the economy in Israel was fairly good. Unemployment rates were at an all-time low. I think I'm a realist. I think this definitely will challenge the job search. Many companies have laid people off. I do think that there are still a lot of companies that are hiring, especially the big ones. This is an opportunity for them to poach employees, especially in high tech. And with regards to the smaller company, the startups, it really depends on their cash flow and whether they can stay afloat after this time. But I think that with all crises, with all pandemics, it has a downside, but this also might be a chance for opportunity. And I'm sure that a lot of people will be reinventing themselves after this time. Regardless of the situation, I do believe that interviewing is a muscle that we have to develop throughout our lifetimes. We live in a gig economy. A lot of us will reinvent our careers over and over again, and we have to know how to brand ourselves and how to interview at the end of the day. So it's a skill that's important regardless of the times. And I want to talk about what companies are looking for, and especially what HR as gatekeepers of these companies are expecting of you. And that's basically it. So let's start, okay? I apologize if I'm looking this way from time to time. I have some notes on another computer, so I'm still focused on you guys. Okay, so the first part of the interviewing process, before you even apply, before you even look for jobs, is knowing your story, okay? Knowing how to present yourself to the outside world. And I always give this example of Alice in Wonderland, which is a fairy tale, a coming of age story that you guys have probably encountered when you were very young, of a girl who falls into a rabbit hole and ends up in this mystical and weird world. And at some point she asks herself, who in the world am I? And she realizes, that's the great puzzle. She realizes that it's not about figuring out this weird and mystical world around her, but it's about figuring out who she is within this world. And if there's one takeaway that you take from today, is that you need to have a clear and desired target job or field in mind before you approach the search. So you shouldn't expect recruiters to piece the pieces of the puzzle for you, okay? Recruiters are not career counselors. You need to keep in mind that they're reviewing hundreds and hundreds of CVs a day, so they're not there to help you figure it out, okay? You need to figure it out for yourself. And it's really a process of self-exploration. There's a lot of career counselors out there that can help you, friends, etc. But come prepared with that before you start your job search. Okay, so how do you even figure it out? How do you figure out that direction? I think that the secret sauce, the jackpot, is the intersection between what you do well. So what is your skill set, what you bring to the table? What do you enjoy doing? So what motivates you? Because at the end of the day, you want to last at a job. And then what are the industry needs? Okay, what is a company's pain points? Because at the end of the day, even if there's something that you do extremely well and you're very motivated to do, but nobody in the industry is looking for, no company is interested in this set of skills, then it will be very difficult to find a job. So it needs to be a balance between these three things. And how do you find a company's pain point? So it's usually in a job description. A job description isn't just some sort of an outline, okay? It's the company telling you the problem that they need for you to solve. So it's really important to study those job descriptions and ask yourself, wait a minute, what are they looking for? And also as an HR manager, from my perspective, when I have a candidate in front of me, I ask myself, do they have the skill set, the motivation, the experience, the potential? Do they have the motivation? Are they going to enjoy it? Are they going to last in my company beyond 3 months? And lastly, are they fulfilling my need? Okay, very important not to forget this point. So given these things, how do you brand yourself? How do you put yourself out there, present yourself in a way that delivers the message? So the first thing is intention. This is a really worrisome stat, but they say that 90% of job seekers don't brand themselves for the job that they want. So usually a CV or the way that job seekers describe themselves is just kind of a mixture of skill sets, credentials, experiences that don't quite sum up to a whole clear message. So again, the recruiter needs to kind of piece it together. I'll give you guys an example just to drive the point home. Once at ITC, we were recruiting for a campus management and office management job, which is a huge job in our organization. It's a 4-floor campus, many tens and tens of students, 3 semesters a year. And I had this lovely young lady who came to interview. And she came from our competitors and she was doing a similar job. And from an HR perspective, I was trying to figure out, well, wait, why are you coming to do the same job in a similar type of business? What's the deal? And she told me that, besides for campus management, she's also interested in marketing, in student admissions, in working together with the students, in business development. And then I had to stop her along the interview and ask her, but wait, are you really looking for a campus management job? Is this your intention? And I realized that it wasn't her intention. She was hoping that this job would be a stepping point to another field. And that, as a recruiter, is not impressive, I would say, or doesn't show me intention because she didn't figure out her story. She didn't figure out what she wanted to brand and market herself as. And that's the kind of legwork she should have done way before coming to the interview. The second thing which we spoke about a pain point, framing yourself as a solution to a problem. So you are the fixer, you are the product, the company is the customer. Your product needs to give the company a solution. And the mission really is to make the employer aware what you can do for them. So it's not all about you, whether you're going to be super happy, super motivated, get all the perks in the world in this company. But again, you're getting a salary for this. You need to show your value to the company. And we'll talk about fit in a bit. The next thing about branding that's really important is creating a consistent social media message. So I think many people make the mistake of thinking that LinkedIn is for the professional and Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all the rest are for the personal. And unfortunately, that's not true, okay? So you need to make sure that, for example, if you're interested in marketing and you write a lot of content, that content, your blogs, your websites are in all your social media. Also, you need to remember that HR people are often stalkerish and they're not only looking at your CV, but they search you online, okay? If I'm not sure, I'm not getting a very positive vibe, or I'm still very curious about someone and I want to know more, I will look them up in all media. So, if you're going clubbing, which I know is not an option these days, and you have some wild pictures, keep those in your personal collection and keep everything out there in line with your professional branding as well. Next, networking. I can't stress this enough, especially in Israel. I don't know how long you guys have been here, but this is a country where the word protektia, meaning it's not what you know, but who you know, is really all the rage. And a lot of the times finding a job here is not about sending your CV to the company, but it's about finding the key people who work in companies that you're interested in that can help push your CV and your profile along. So you will need help along the way, and it's okay to ask for it. I also think that it's important to build that network. So going to meetups, things like this where, you're not only listening to the lecturer, but you're forming connections with each other. And I'm sure each person has connections and different circles that can help you along. Lastly, a very important principle, which we'll see over and over during this lecture, is the show, don't tell principle. So it's the key really to storytelling. I don't want to hear that you're an amazing marketer or an amazing salesperson, but I want to see that the proof is in the pudding. Do you have blog posts to show me? Do you have websites to show me? Do you have facts of your sales and the revenue that you brought to a company, your experiences? So it's really important to bring all these things to the table during an interview and when branding yourself, and not just tell me that you're good, okay? So that's the show, don't tell principle. Okay, next we'll start talking about the CV. So your CV is your first step to getting noticed. This is your primary marketing document. Okay? Recruiters see your CV before they even see your face. And so it's really important that it be on point. And what do I mean? The first thing is that it should have an objective statement, a branding statement, meaning 1 to 2 sentences of who you are, what you do, and what makes you unique at it. Do you guys know on average how many seconds a recruiter takes to read a CV? Any fingers could tell me? Do you guys know? 7, close.
I think like 15 maybe maximum.
15, that's very generous. Okay, so Jonathan was really close. It actually takes them 6 seconds. I actually met a recruiter not too long ago who told me she only reads a CV for 3 seconds. I thought that's nearly impossible, but that's how fast they skim. They're not even reading it, they're skimming it. And the reason for this is that they get hundreds and hundreds of CVs a day, and they're really looking for those keywords that are in the job description that they want to pop out of them. So that's why your CV has to be tailored. Okay, study that job description. Look at what those specific points that they're looking for. And another reason is that humans today aren't the only people who are reviewing our CVs. It's also computers and algorithms, especially in large companies that get mass applications. So make sure that the computer is picking up on those words. Make sure also that the CV includes information that counts, okay? It should be 1 page, no longer. This isn't a biography of your life, okay? This only contains information that is pertinent to getting you accepted to the position. Details are super important. So spelling, capital, punctuation, formatting, super, super, super important. Because remember, they're seeing this before they see your face. It has to be perfect. And there's no reason that it shouldn't. There's tons of people out there that can review your CV for you. There's people that even do it for pay. There's people who will gladly volunteer. I had a boss one time who, even if I brought him the perfect profile for our openings, if he saw that something was missing, a period, a capital, he would nix that CV straight away. And he told me that he's super detail oriented. And if someone's not detail oriented enough in their CV, then that's probably not someone that he could work for. It's especially important for positions like writing, coding. If you're making a mistake on your CV, then will you be making mistakes on your code as well? So pay attention to that. Also, if they request the CV in a specific language, if they request it in English and you send it in Hebrew, again, that attests to either the fact that you didn't pay attention to the detail or you just don't care, okay? So all these nuances are super important. Discriminating information. So I often see this in Israeli CVs, and I'm still trying to figure out why people do this, but often people include information that isn't relevant and might be a disadvantage to them, like age, marital status, number of children, okay? avoid all information that might lead the recruiter, whether consciously or unconsciously, to discriminate against you. And I have a slide of all the discriminating questions later on, so you guys know what is right and what is wrong in an interview. It's okay if you're making aliyah, it's okay to include your aliyah date. That often explains, whether or not you did military service, which is something that sometimes recruiters look for in your CV. And it's always best to, as I said, give your CV to somebody that you know that works in the company. Okay, just emailing it sometimes makes it get lost in the shuffle, and it would be a shame. Lastly, super important to keep a list of the positions and the places that you applied to, because often people apply and then they forget, and then when they get called for the phone interview, it's a little awkward when the interviewer feels like you don't remember applying for the position. Okay, so we're going to take our first break for questions, okay, because I think I spoke a lot so far. Are there any specific questions about anything that I've said? Feel free, you guys, to unmute yourself, to show your faces. The point is really—
I have a question about aliyah date. Like,
yes,
you just said that you might mention this, but I think that it will be quite clear from my CV, like where I used to work before in another country.
yeah. So if you if you include the locations of the companies that you worked for, that might be very clear as well. But just in case, because the recruiters skim so quickly, in case they miss on that detail, if you'd like, you can include the aliyah date as well on top, just so it's clear to them. Any other questions?
In Israel, what kind of information are they looking for on a resume? Do they only care about work experience, or do they also want to know, say, your volunteer experience, past classes, things like that?
So first of all, I think it really depends on the amount of experience that you have. The key thing is to try to keep it on one page. So if you have a lot of professional experience, it's fine to keep it just to that and not to your courses and volunteering. It's also fine to include the volunteering as well, because it shows that you're a well-rounded person and you do things beyond work. With regards to courses, I would say include that if you don't have enough professional experience and you want to show that your courses demonstrate that you have some familiarity with the topic. If you are in high tech and you code, you're a developer, so you can include the languages or the courses that you took, but it really depends on your field and the level of experience that you have. Obviously, if you have a lot of professional experience, you want to highlight that. If you don't, try to highlight that in different ways in your volunteering, in your courses, etc. Okay? Anybody else?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
Sorry, I heard someone else speaking.
Yes, is it Natalie?
Yeah. You mentioned putting the aliyah date on. This might be quite specific to people who are doing Masa programs, but there's a visa extension that you can get for work, which means you're not a citizen, you're not on a program. And I suppose I was going to ask, what's your recommendation on kind of how honest you are about your status? Because your status as able to work won't even start until your Masa program finishes, and you're not necessarily choosing to make aliyah. That's my first question.
Good point. So you definitely do not have to write on your CV that you have a working visa status. I would leave that for when you get your foot through the door during the interviewing. Then I would point that out and see that it's okay and it's a company that could employ you. Many companies have different restrictions or policies based on that, but I wouldn't put it on the CV. Like, get your foot through the door first, interview, make sure that you have that rapport, and then bring it up.
Okay, good to know. And you mentioned like having the kind of buzzwords and keywords on your CV that relate to the job. Do kind of recruiters in Israel prefer you to be quite literal? You know, let's say team working was a required skill. Do they want you to write the word team working and then say what you did within a company, or do they want it listed as skills team working, or, you know, you to fluff it out saying I worked in a team and then they can just infer it? What's your kind of recommendation?
So this goes back to the show don't tell principle. I'd rather your CV show that you're a team worker rather than you just state, you know, good team working skills. So for example, in your last job, if you worked in a team of 6 doing this, that, and that, you can write that as an action item. Worked as part of a team of 6 and did this and that. So again, team worker is one of those kind of vague things. It's more of the maybe fluff part of a job description. I'm talking about, you know, the actual responsibilities that they describe and the keywords there. And that's what I'd like for you to include in the CV.
Okay, and the last question I had was just about the personal profile or branding statement. I just heard from people that this isn't really a thing in Israel, and like a few people I asked like just knew nothing about it. And I know just from being English, it's quite I thought maybe it's a British thing to kind of just write this kind of, again, like kind of this sort of fluffy statement at the beginning about what you're after and what you've done. So would you suggest even in Israel, like definitely putting this on?
Okay, so good point. So there's definitely a lot of CVs that don't have an objective/branding statement, and that's totally fine, especially if, you know, it's very apparent from their professional experiences, you know, that is what they do. Like sometimes you read a CV with no statement and it is clear to me that this person is a marketing professional. That's all they've done over the past couple of years. I think if you have less experience or your experience is very varied, and it's hard for the recruiter to fully understand where you're coming from to this position, it would be to your advantage to just clarify that for them, either in an objective statement or in the body of the email where you send your CV, to give them that 1 to 3 sentences of, this is who I am, this is what I've done, this is why I'm good at this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, so are we good to move forwards, everybody? Okay.
Actually, I have one more question about the personal branding statement.
Yes.
Is if you consider, like, do you find it important to add in specifics and action items that you've done in your personal branding statement, or to leave that more into your professional experience and to keep the branding statement almost as more of vague and like buzzwords?
Yeah, so I would actually keep the action items in the description, okay? You don't want the branding statement to be too long, but the branding statement still needs to be targeted. You know, I sometimes find a branding statement that sounds like this: amazing salesperson, operations, office management, marketing. And I'm just really confused about that because it just seems like a jack of all trades. So very targeted to what you're looking to do, and then the proof and the factual information should be in the rest of your CV.
And even making it pointed, like changing your branding statement depending on the position that you're applying for in the company you're applying for.
Absolutely. But that also means that you'll have to tailor the rest of your CV as well. It's not just the branding statement that you change. You'll have to highlight different things. And it's always good to have about 2 to 3 versions of your CV, depending on the different positions that you're looking to work in. That's totally fine. Okay, we're good? Okay, so let's move on. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with a little video. If there's problems with the sound or anything, please signal.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You know, the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people, like my parents. That's funny.
Well, Amy, when you're working for me, you have to have those kind of research skills because I'll send you things for you to comb through and get the answers and send them to me. So for that, you got to be really good at technology.
For stuff like that, no problem. I'll just ask Siri.
You'll just ask Siri?
You know, Siri, tell me this, Siri, find me that. We're all good at getting you the answers.
Tell Siri I want you ready to go at 8 sharp each and every morning.
I don't understand
What don't you understand?
what you just said.
You don't understand be ready to go?
No. You said
Oh, sorry, guys.
8, right?
Yes.
8 like in the morning, 8?
Yes, in the morning.
Yeah. That kind of doesn't work for me. Who gets up at 8?
I do.
I Skype with my French boyfriend in Paris until like 3 in the morning. I don't even get to Starbucks until like 10, where I order my grande chai tea latte, 3 pumps, skim milk, light water, 2% foam, extra hot, but not too hot. So if it's okay, I work best in the morning at 10:45.
Wow. Amy, I don't think we're going to be a good fit.
Why are you so negative? I can sense your hostilities, and right now I am not feeling very safe. I've been here for over 5 minutes, and the only nice thing you have said to me was nice resume, which I typed all night for this meeting with you. You've given me no guidance, no validation, no encouragement, no supervision. Is there an HR director somewhere?
HR director?
Yes, I need to speak to someone. I may have to take off today as a mental health day.
Take the day off. Amy, look at me. You don't work here.
Are you firing me?
Okay, yes.
Okay. So this is obviously a very extreme example of an interview and how some candidates might be perceived in the interviewing process. Sometimes it's an example of how some millennials might be perceived in the interviewing process. We don't always have a good rep. So entitled, unreliable, maybe not so loyal. And the point of this is to show you guys that it's not all about us. Again, we shouldn't approach the job search just thinking about whether the position in the company fulfills our need, but it's about fit. It's about how our skills and what we bring to the table can serve the company, can fix its problems, and how we find that balance, that win-win situation between our needs and wants and the company's needs and wants. Okay.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology.
Slide. Okay. So we're going to start delving deeper into the actual interviewing process. There are many steps. It looks very different in many different companies. Okay, so in some companies it's a lot longer, some a lot shorter, but I just want to familiarize yourself with all the different types of interviews out there, what the point of them is, what they're looking for, so you can learn how to best prepare yourself. Okay, so the first type of interview is the phone interview. Okay, this happens after they've read your CV. They haven't seen your face yet. But they're interested in learning more. They're interested in hearing your voice, asking you some questions, gauging your personality. Okay, so the purpose of this type of interview is to pre-screen your skills. They're not ready to invite you to their living room, to invite you to the company for an interview, but this is the step before. Okay, and they'll ask you all kinds of dry facts. Your language, if they're looking for an English speaker or a French speaker, they might switch to French or English in the middle of the interview. So be prepared. If you marketed yourself as, a fluent French, Spanish, and English speaker, make sure you can show them that as well if it's required in the job. They'll ask you about your experience and how it's relevant to the position, your availability. Are you available immediately, or do you have to give a 30 days notice to your previous company? Your reasons for leaving your previous job. It's really important when answering that question to make sure never to bash your previous company or your boss. Always answer diplomatically. And also your salary expectations. This is a question that Israeli recruiters always ask off the bat. It's not a type of question in this country where you can say, let me research and get back to you on that, or I don't know, we'll see, okay? They will ask you again and again, and they'll want an answer. Why? Because they're pre-screening you. If your salary expectations are too high, then they won't want to waste their time on a whole interviewing process. I often get asked how to answer this question. So first of all, as people who might be new to the country or people who might be thinking of making aliyah, the wrong way to answer this question is, I'm new to the country, I'm an oleh chadash, and I don't know what market salaries are. That indicates to me that you haven't done your research or that you're not resourceful enough to go figure it out, okay? So there are tons of resources out there. There are online salary charts based on your positions, your level of experience. Okay, there are many. There's Nisha, there's Ethosia, tons of resources out there. Also, because we're in a very casual country, sometimes it's totally fine to ask a friend or someone you know within the field what they were making when they were starting off, or what you should be expected to make. It's totally fine to ask that question. Just like people ask you how much you pay rent in this country, it's also fine to ask that. So come prepared. You can give a range. So for example, say something like from 10 to 12, but be ready to accept that 10K offer. Okay, so if you be ready to accept that lower range and do your personal research and see if that's something you can live off of. If you decide to give a ballpark number, make sure that you show flexibility, okay? Because if you say something like 30K, not more, not less, and that's way beyond what they're willing to offer, they're not going to even consider you. And you want to try and elongate the interviewing stage as long as possible. So you can say something like 12K, but I'm flexible to talk. It depends on the benefit. Show your flexibility, get your foot through that door. I think a couple of words about phone interviewing. I think that today we've kind of forgotten how to talk over the phone. We're all on our WhatsApp, texting, etc. And it's really important that when you're applying for jobs, pick up that phone, okay? Because recruiters will often not call you again if you miss the call. They have a list of people that might be potentially relevant for the position. And if you've missed your chance, they might not get back to you. Okay, so pick up that phone. Another thing that I suggest, there's the Truecaller app. I don't know if you guys are familiar, that tells you who is calling. Super good to download onto your phone, because sometimes you're not really prepared for that phone interview, and telling you who's calling might give you those few extra seconds that you need to mentally switch yourself to an interviewing mode, okay? Lastly, if the time isn't right, if you're on the bus or you're outside or you're in a noisy area, don't continue with the interview. It's okay to reschedule and tell that recruiter, hey, do you mind calling me in an hour, or can I get back to you? Because if the recruiter can't make out what you're saying, or if they feel that you're not very focused, it might be perceived as not really respecting the opportunity, okay? Okay. So I want to talk about some of my phone interview pet peeves. I've done hundreds of these over the years. The first is the person who answers the phone as if they're doing a favor. Okay, so sometimes I get people answering the phone saying hello, and then when I introduce myself, they perk up and they're like, oh yes, hi. So that to me demonstrates that there's a bit of a split personality there. It's really important to keep it energetic and passionate throughout, even if this isn't your dream job. Suppose it's just something you applied to because you think might be relevant. Go through with the interview, be energetic. Sometimes the recruiter might think that perhaps it's not a match for this position, but I have this other opening that I haven't published yet that you would be a great fit for. So recruiters have this uncanny memory for faces and attitudes and names, which is why I told you guys to show me who you are. So remember that, okay? The next profile is the interrogator. So this is the person that I call, and before I even get to, introduce myself or ask them questions, right off the bat, they have tons of questions for me. What's the pay? Where's the location? How many people? What are the hours? And that to me indicates that this is someone who's just looking for a job, not for a career. So it's definitely fine to ask questions, but leave it to the end. Let the interviewer lead and show your interest. And lastly, there's the smart aleck or the big shot. This is the person who says something like, well, if you read my CV, you would know that I did this and that, okay? Of course, I read your CV. This is why I'm calling. So just keep that attitude in check. At the end of the day, we're gauging your personality. We want to see if you're likable, if we want to work with you. And if that doesn't come across really well in the phone interview, then I can guarantee you it will not lead to a face-to-face interview. Okay. Let's start talking about the frontal types of interviews. So they liked your CV, they liked your voice on the phone, they liked your answers, and they are inviting you to their living room, to the company. Nowadays, it might happen physically in the company, or it might still happen like this via Zoom. The most common classic type of interview is the traditional one-on-one face-to-face interview. This often happens with one's direct manager, but it can repeat itself several times with different people within the company. Okay, so with a team member, with the CEO, with the COO, depending on the size of the company. And what they're trying to assess here is your skills, okay, which they also assess during the phone interview, but now it's going to be a lot more in depth. Your personality, likability. At the end of the day, if they hire you, they are stuck with you for a while and they want to see that you guys fit. And lastly, fit. Okay, so again, it's that win-win situation. You need to show how you can benefit the company, how you are of value to solving a certain problem of theirs, and why the company, yeah, that's basically it, okay? Of course, you can, ask questions to figure out why this is beneficial for you as well, but your first point is to prove to them that you are of value, that you are a good investment, okay? The next type of interview is the panel interview. So here it's when you are seated in front of several people, different representatives. So it could be a member of HR, a team member, your direct manager, and each of them will ask you a question based on their touch point with your position, okay? The purpose of this interview is that it saves time for the company and that it's the opportunity to get a collective opinion all at once. So instead of inviting you several times to interview with each and every one of these people, they're interviewing you all together. Now, the key for you is to engage with every single person, okay? Some people might be a little bit more intimidating, or you don't feel like you have so much chemistry, or they're not so comfortable to engage with, but you need to look everybody in the eye. You need to answer everybody's questions and just be engaged. I'll give you guys an example. When I was just starting off, I was interviewing at the police for an organizational psychology position, and I was seated in front of 6 different policemen, literally bon cop to bad cop. Some were very intimidating, some were really friendly, and I also felt like, they were trying to play the part to see how I would react. And really, I understood that the key was to answer and to look everybody in the eye, okay? Okay, next, this is a really, really let's call it sexy type of interview that's super common today is the behavioral interview, okay? These are questions based on common situations that you might have encountered in the past. So for example, the interviewer will ask you to describe a time when, share an example of, and common situations include teamwork, conflict at work or a disagreement with a direct supervisor, a time where you had to solve a problem or initiative that you brought about. And the rationale for these types of interviews is that the interviewer is saying to themselves, if I can understand how you behaved previously in your previous company, in a previous position, in this type of situation, perhaps it will help me predict how you will behave or you will react when you come work here at my company. Okay, so these types of questions are super important, and there's a technique, there is a way to answer them. And if you use this technique, you will be hitting the jackpot, most definitely. So this technique is called the STAR technique, okay? STAR stands for situation, task, action, result. So it's a very constructed and organized answer. And I'll give you guys an example, I'll explain, but before I even delve into that, when you are asked a question in an interview and it's a question that requires thinking, first step is take that second or two to construct your answer. I think a lot of people are super nervous and they just shoot an answer right away and it's disorganized and they can't quite figure out where they're going with it, and it just doesn't end up being to the point, okay? So it's okay if there's that awkward second of silence, but it shows the interviewer that you're thinking, okay? That you're thoughtful. So when answering a behavioral question, the first thing you need to do, remember, you're a storyteller, okay? You need to set the scene, give some context, some background to the situation. The second thing you need to do is describe the task that you were assigned or the problem that you had to solve. That's T. A, action. What did you do to solve it? What were your ideas? Where was your creative thinking? Where did you take it? And then R, result. What came about it? What were the benefits? What were the rewards? What were the savings? Were you able to bring money to your company? So I'll give you guys an example just to drive the point home so it's not very vague, okay? So S, situation. Our customers complained that there were too many bugs in the app and customer satisfaction rates were down by 50%. I set the scene. You guys understand what the problem is. T, I was charged with the task of fixing all the bugs and bringing customer satisfaction rates back to their normal levels. A, action, what did I do? I mapped out all the bugs in the app from the past month. I fixed the code, reviewed it, and then performed quality assurance. Result, what happened? I resolved 95% of the issues reported, and I also found additional bugs not reported, and customer satisfaction rates increased by 50%. Okay, this is an example of an answer that's extremely factual, extremely constructed, and helps drive the point home, okay? You're bringing numbers here, you're setting the scene, you're letting the interviewer imagine the problem and the solution that you brought about. And this is a perfect example of the concept show, don't tell. You're not just telling me that you're a good coder and you're good at fixing bugs, but you're showing me how you did it in a real life situation. Okay, another type of interview, which might take a while until it comes up again post-corona, is the lunch or the coffee interview. So the purpose of this type of interview is to get to know you outside of the office in a more informal setting. It's often not the first interview you'll encounter, but it depends. Because in Israel, we're in a very informal country, sometimes the first meeting might be a coffee date, or if it's a very small company, they might decide, you know, let's see you outside before we invite you to our doors. So it really, really depends. The key is to remember that, you know, even if you're in a coffee shop, even if you're outside, meeting in a park, whatever it may be, this is an interview, okay? It's not a date. So you have to keep it professional. It's also not all about the food. So don't order the most expensive thing on the menu. Don't order something that's too messy that will, you know, cause you to have food in your teeth. Mind your table manners. And also, just so you know, it's expected for the company to foot the bill. Okay. Again, some of you might never have a coffee interview in your lives, but just so you know, this thing does exist. Sometimes in business settings, especially. Okay, next, this is a really big one as well. It's the case or puzzle interview. So this is when you're given a case or a problem to solve. It traditionally started in consulting companies, and it's become more and more common, especially in high tech today and in many different fields. Sometimes you're given the case or problem even before the phone interview, okay? It's a way to filter mass applications and a way to see whether you really have the skills that you say that you have. So rather than tell us about it, why don't you solve a problem for us and we'll see how you're doing. So again, sometimes you might get it before the phone interview. Sometimes you might get it within the interview process. It might be an in-house test or task, or it might be a take-home as well. It's an additional screener at the end of the day. I can tell you that at ITC, I don't accept any candidate before they have done some sort of an assignment that's position specific. So, you know, if it's a content writer, I want to see how they write content. If it's a salesperson, I'll do a mock sales call and see how they react. So just be ready for these. Okay. And then finally, we have the HR interview. So HR people are usually, as I said, they're skilled interviewers. They've experienced many candidates. They have many stories. Honestly, some of them can write books. They're often either the initial gatekeeper. So it might be the first person who interviews you in the company, or they're the veto power. They might be the last person. So you might have 5 interviews in the company and boom, then you meet HR. And depending on their positioning and the power that they have in the company, they might be the ones to nix an applicant at the end of the process or before it even started, okay? The interview is often skill and behavioral based, okay? So it's a mixture of both, but also a heavy weight on the behavioral as well. They might ask you for references, okay? So always make sure that, you know, you have a previous employer who feels comfortable referring you. You should always call them before and, you know, let them know that they might get a phone call from a company so that they're not surprised. And lastly, like I said, social media checks, okay? HR will look for you in social media, so make sure it's kosher. I just want to say a couple of words on assessment centers because they're quite popular in this country. I don't know if you've heard of them. Some popular ones are Adam Lo or Pilat. Basically, these are centers where companies send their applicants and the candidates go through a lot of testing during the testing day in the center. So the centers basically try to evaluate the candidates' behaviors on the criteria that are most necessary for their position in the company. Okay, so you might see some job-related simulations, some logic testing, some mathematical reasoning, some group dynamics, interviewing with a psychologist. And these assessment centers are mostly common in large corporations that have to filter through mass applications. So the electric company in Israel is an example. And there's ways to prepare for these days, okay? They're usually long 7 to 8 hour days. There's also centers that, it's kind of like preparing for an SAT or a GRE, okay? There's centers that, you know, help familiarize you with the common questions that you might be asked. And the key is to be authentic. It's a long day of testing, so don't try to impress too hard. You're being watched. A lot of the testers are psychology students that are writing some notes about you and, you know, trying to gauge how you deal with stress. Are you an honest person? Are you looking at your partner and, you know, cheating off their test answers? So if you do come across it, there's definitely ways to prepare. Okay, so those are the different types of interviews. Okay, let's stop for just a second. I'll see if you guys have any questions. Was there anything that wasn't clear that you're curious about?
Hi, I had a question about group interviews. I've had them before where it's like a group of like 5 to, I've had, I think the largest one, like 15 people getting interviewed by like a few people in a room. If you have any advice for that situation.
Just to give me some context, is this in a specific field?
At the time, it was more customer service and sales-based field. Yeah, just sort of asking about previous experience, and then there was some like challenges, but on a sort of smaller scale.
And so they're interviewing you in a group, meaning that every candidate hears another candidate's answers?
Yes.
Got it. That's quite interesting. It sounds more of a kind of group dynamics type of setting. I think they're trying to gauge kind of how you react to everybody in the group. You know, within a group setting, there's some people who take on a more dominant role, a more passive role. It does make sense to me that it was for a more customer service or salesy job. Maybe they want to see who are the people who stuck out, who kind of shine, because those are the qualities that are required in that type of position. But I haven't seen much of that. I've seen group dynamic exercises, but not actual interviewing as a whole. So I would say the key is to be authentic. Don't try to outshine anyone or overly impress. Just stand out on your own.
Great, thank you.
I have a question about the salary range.
Yes.
And you said there are some resources online that we can look up companies or look up the position. Can you give us like examples of places to look for this?
Yes, I actually have the links, which I can maybe send Michael, but a lot of these job boards are from recruitment companies like Nisha, Ethosia, All Jobs, which is a job board online, and they all have these salary boards that lists position and salary based on years of experience. It's also important to take these things with a grain of salt. It really depends what company you're, going into. Is it a startup? Is it a corporate? And salary ranges differ. So definitely you can use those job boards, but I would also say ask around. It's very important to actually speak to people.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask?
Hello.
Hello, my name is Ella. I want to ask about, you said that you are also was checking like a creative content writing, like a content makers.
Yes.
How do you, I think it's more job for like a manager who is a kind of the head of department of creating writings, who is like a chef who understands it. How did you like manage this?
Okay, so good question, because it really depends on the structure of the company. Sometimes a company has a marketing or content department, and a company like our own that's quite small, 20 people, every person is his own department. It's not a team. So in our company, we gauged it through having the candidate, write a blog post on our activities. Like we give them a PowerPoint presentation and write a post or write a social media entry, etc. I think it really depends on the activity of the company. You know, if it's an online company, if they have a website, so they would probably tailor the assignment to the type of content that they have.
But usually it's kind of small piece of text, because I had these exercises, like they made you like write a big text like for a few thousand letters, and I don't. Is it okay in Israel? Like, can you have like a? Can they make you write a big piece of text? Is it okay, or you should say no? It's
No.
not okay.
So first of all, they can do whatever they want, you know, if that's their way to assess you. And because you're the one being interviewed, you should always be open and, you know, do what they say if you want to get accepted to the position. If you don't, and this isn't for you, and this isn't the type of, the assignment doesn't reflect the type of position that you want, then obviously it's your choice. If they're asking you for 1,000 words, and they have every right. It really, like I said, it depends on the business.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, a lot of the interviewing process in many companies have become quite long and quite complicated. Sometimes you feel like you're working for them already, but it's because it's quite a competitive world out there, and they want to assess the best people for them.
Understood.
So we're going to move forwards, and then I'll leave some questions in the end. There's a couple more things I'd like to go through with you. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about, not quite last, there's a couple more things, is the psychology of interviews. So I'm a psychologist by training, and I think that one of the mistakes that a lot of candidates make is that they don't ask themselves, wait a minute, what is the purpose of this question? What is the interviewer tapping into? It's not just about being concerned on how to answer the question correctly, but it's understanding the mind behind the question, okay? So I wanna give you guys some, first of all, psychological tools that can help you when interviewing, and I wanna explain the psychology of some common questions out there, okay? The first psychological tool is called the primacy effect. So human memory works in a way that we often remember things that come first or things that come last. And that's why the first impression is quite important for interviewing. Sometimes, you know, before you even open your mouth and answer the question, tell me about yourself, you're being assessed for the way you conduct yourself, etc. So the way you conduct yourself is very important. And that starts, first of all, with a firm handshake. Body language is important. So not too firm, you don't want to break the interviewer's hand, obviously, but also not too lax. You know, someone who shakes my hand like that, it just feels like they're really not coming into this very confident. And just so you know, statistically, 90% of what we're saying is through our body language or paralanguage. Okay, so that's huge. And make sure that the body language exudes your brand, okay? So greet the interviewer by name. You should always know who the person interviewing you is, what their name is, what their position is in the company. If the company doesn't volunteer that information, it is your right to ask, okay? So say, hi, Daniel, I'm Orit, nice to meet you. That exudes confidence. State your name with confidence, dress the part. We'll talk about fashion in a bit. And there's this quote which I love, is that your energy introduces you before you even speak. So remember that. Also, when you step foot into a company, you never know who's watching. A lot of the times the office manager or the receptionist knows that there's somebody coming for an interview for this specific position, and they're on the lookout for you. They want to see, you know, who you are you nice? Is this somebody we're going to want to work with? And make sure to really be nice to everybody, to say hello. Your interview starts the moment you step into the company, okay? It's not the moment you sit with your interviewer. The second thing that I recommend is finding a commonality between you and your interviewer. So when you know who your interviewer is, Remember, this is a two-way street. It's not only HR that can stalk you on social media, you should stalk your interviewer on social media. And that means look them up on LinkedIn, look them up on Facebook, look them up on Instagram, see what their background is. Maybe you guys were born in the same state. Maybe you guys went to the same school. Maybe you guys learned the same things. Try to find that commonality. The more you know about the person, the more you'll come confident into the interview. Their hobbies, maybe they go surfing, and maybe that's something you can, put into that tell me about yourself question. Obviously, don't make it up. Don't say that you surf if you don't, because who knows, maybe that next interview might be at the beach surfing and you'll make a fool of yourself, but try to find a connection, okay? That can help sometimes. Okay, let's go on to the questions, some of the common questions. So I kind of want to open the stage for you guys, and feel free to butt in, to say what you think it is. Let's start with the first very common question, tell me about yourself, which is often the question that an interviewer first starts off with. What do you think this question is about? Any volunteers? No? Okay. So
is it just to be your ability to perform an elevator pitch?
Ooh, good. You totally guessed my next slide. Great. So that's the key word, elevator pitch. So let's start about what this question isn't about. First of all, you need to come prepared for this question, okay? So unlike Michael Scott from The Office, who says, sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way. That is not the way to answer the tell me about yourself question. It's something that you already have to construct at home, practice at home, and when you're actually there in the situation, it will flow out of you, okay? It's not something that you're thinking about as you go along. So how not to answer this question? Don't pretend that you are on a date, okay? This question isn't only about your personal life, okay? Remember, you're interviewing for a job, it's about the professional. So you can include a little bit about your personal, your hobbies, where you came from, etc., but it's a professional question. Don't rehash your CV, okay? So they read your CV, they asked you about it over the phone. It's not for you to tell them point by point, in 2019 I did this and then I did that, no? And also, it's not an opportunity for you to be too shy, okay? You're presenting yourself and your brand, but it's not an opportunity for you to brag. Don't say something like, I am the best salesperson you will ever meet, okay? That, again, that's telling, that's not showing. But saying something like, I led my division in sales over the past 3 years and brought a revenue of $1.5 million tells me a lot more about yourself. Okay, so what is it? So just like Jonathan, right? Jonathan said, it is the elevator pitch. What is an elevator pitch for those of you who aren't familiar? The elevator pitch is a scenario where suppose you are stuck with a business man or a CEO in an elevator for a couple of seconds, because you know that an elevator ride is about 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes, depending on the height of the building. And you have to pitch an idea to them, okay? Something that you're crazy about, that you've really been waiting for this opportunity. The key is for them to actually listen to you and think and be interested, is for you to pitch that idea in the shortest, most attractive way possible, okay? So the tell me about yourself question, the elevator pitch approach basically means that you need to show them why they should invest in you, okay? Show that to them in 1 to 2 minutes length. So you're not telling the story of your life. Don't start with, I was born in 1987 at the Jewish General Hospital in Montreal, no. But basically how you meet the requirements. So it's a combination of several things, okay? Of your experiences in the professional sphere, of your values, your passion, why you're attracted to the company's mission, and then a little bit of personal, okay? Because they still want to know you and your personality. Okay, let's try some other questions. What about this one? What do you know about the company? What do you guys think they're gauging here?
They're basically trying to check if I did my homework and I read about the company and I searched some information on LinkedIn or whatever. So how prepared I am.
Great. You guys are good at this, I have to say. Right, so this is that's like the second question that I love to ask. And like Anna said, have you done your research? One of the answers I get is, yeah, you know, what you told me during the phone interview. That's not a satisfactory answer, okay? I want to see that you actually went on the website, that you read about it. Maybe you know something about the CEO. It's really you doing your research. And if you have done your research, it indicates to me that you have a high level of interest in the company and the position. What about this next question? Why are you interested in this position? It sounds like such an obvious question, and then sometimes it's just asked again. Okay, it's fairly simple. It's a chance to reiterate your strengths and skill set. Sometimes it might not be entirely clear to the interviewer why you are here, and they want to make sure that you're very passionate about why you're here in the interview, especially if you come maybe from a field that's slightly unrelated. So sometimes you really have to push yourself more to show your value, and that's a chance to reiterate it again. Okay, this is a classic question. I don't love it. I usually like to figure out what a person's point for improvement is, but sometimes you'll be asked straight out, what is your weakness? Or what's your point for improvement? What do you think they're trying to gauge here?
They want to find something that is not a major flaw to the company or yourself, but also for you to show how you managed to kind of work around that and been able to either overcome it or you just kind of recognize and move forward.
Okay, amazing. Natalie, I think that's the best answer that I've gotten to this question. I usually get just blank faces. So first of all, they want to gauge that you are self-aware and that you're honest, okay? A lot of times when I was working in an assessment center, people thought that the secret and the correct answer to this question is, well, I don't have any weaknesses. That is not what the interviewer wants to hear, okay? That means you're not self-aware. As Natalie says, they want to know that you are self-aware, that you have points for improvement, but that these are points that will not completely negate what you're supposed to be doing on the job. So for example, if you're applying to be a CEO of a company, a weakness that would probably not be good to present would be that you're horrible at public speaking, okay? Because that is a skill that is required of a CEO in a company. So find something that's not directly related to the position, and I always suggest to frame it as a wish, okay? So you can say something like, not if you're applying to be a CEO of a company, but I wish I was more skilled at public speaking, but I'm working on it. I just applied to an improv class that I hope will help me feel more comfortable on the stage. Okay, so that would be an example of the way that you should probably frame a weakness. Okay, next. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Another common question. What do you guys think this is all about? Anybody?
Your career goals?
Your career goals, good. Yes, so this is about gauging your expectations for yourself, your career goals, like you said, and trying to understand whether there's a growth path for you in the company. Okay, so for example, if you're applying for a junior position and in 5 years you see yourself as the COO of the company, you probably didn't set very realistic expectations, okay? And they probably won't take you so seriously, okay? So try to set this as something that you see yourself doing in 5 years, but that also aligns with the growth path in the company and that is realistic. Next, how do you deal with a stressful situation? So this, if you guys remember it, is a behavioral question, okay? And best backed up with an example. What do you guys think this is about? Okay. So they're basically trying to figure out what your stress reduction tactics are. We live in a world where there's strict deadlines at work. Everything's very, very fast paced. They need to know that you're able to deal with it. And they want to know that stress doesn't interfere with your goals. Okay. And lastly, do you have any questions? Usually the last question in an interview, what's this about?
They want to know that you've got a bit of interest in the company and you can get a bit personal in that, but also that you've kind of done your research, so it's not a generic question about something you maybe should have read on their website. And they want you to have a question to kind of show an interest. Great,
Natalie. So you just took the words out of my mouth. The wrong way to answer this question is no, I do not have any questions. And you know, for those of you who are not very good at improvising on the spot, you should prepare your list of questions beforehand. Come ready, take out that notebook, it's totally fine. Some good questions are, you know, what's a typical day like on the job? What are the challenges faced? One question that always surprises me, and I think it's always a great one, is, do you like working at the company? What do you like about the company? Okay, and you know, if they take a lot of time to answer or they're hesitant, that might raise a red flag for yourself. So always come prepared. It shows that you're a curious individual, that you've done your research, and make sure that they're insightful as well. Okay. We spoke during the slide of the CD, we spoke about discrimination. So some of the topics that interviewers aren't allowed asking you about. And I want you guys to familiarize yourself with them, because in Israel, I think that because it's a very informal mentality and culture, a lot of interviewers do ask these questions, even though it's completely illegal. So first of all, I want you to know your rights and what are some of the things that you don't have to volunteer information for, and also answer if you are being asked. It's a bit of a fine balance, because suppose an interviewer does ask you and you're still interested in the position, so you don't want to, you know, completely say, well, I'm not answering that question. I sometimes, in my past, I've made a bit of a joke out of it. So once I've been asked, you know, what my age was and whether I was married, and I just said something like, oh, you guys asked that here? It's so funny, because in Canada, you know, that question isn't asked, and they got the point and they kept going. But I did it in a lighthearted way. So tread with caution, okay? Don't show that you're too defensive, but if you don't feel comfortable answering it, or you think that this might lead you not to get accepted, it's fine to say, you know, with your permission, like, I'd love to move forwards, or is this information necessary for the position? And hopefully they will get the point. Okay, a couple of words on fashion. So I'm assuming some of you have been here for an amount of time and realize that this is a very casual country where grooms often wear jeans to their own weddings. And I think sometimes, especially for those of us from North America or Europe, we're a little bit confused as to how to come dressed to an interview. So, you know, suits and the tailored look doesn't often work here. Again, depending on the industry, if you're interviewing to become a lawyer, then yes, lawyers here wear suits and tailored look, but in high tech, it's very, very casual. You might see people in shorts and flip-flops. Yet, this doesn't mean that you should come to the interview with shorts and flip-flops. You should come to the interview in a way that shows, A, that you're respecting the opportunity, and in a way that reflects your brand, okay? So not too short, not too tight, not too revealing, not too much makeup. Torn jeans, I know they're all the rage, but not during an interview, and no silly t-shirts, okay? So this one says, I tried to be normal once, worst 2 minutes of my life. Let's keep that for home. Another thing that someone once told me, which I think is a good tip, is about perfume. So if you guys know, our most primal sense is the sense of smell. And even if you think that your perfume is just absolutely delicious, it's possible that the interviewer doesn't think so, or it doesn't, there's something that just doesn't fare well with their sense of smell. So it's best to actually not wear perfume to an interview. Also, some people are allergic to perfume. So yes, deodorant, but perfume, leave that for a later stage, okay? Okay. Lastly, so I want to talk a little bit about the Israeli cultural gap and how to navigate it. I was raised in an Israeli home, but in Canada, I thought it was very familiar with Israel from family visits, etc. I speak Hebrew fluently, and yet interviewing in Israel was a whole other ballgame. It was very different from back at home. And it's something to mentally prepare ourselves for. So as I said, it's a very informal mentality. Israel is all about tachlis. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this word, but it's about getting to the point. So, you know, whereas maybe in North America, we're all about small talk. Here, less of the case. I would say don't try to impress too hard. Be authentic, speak directly, be frank, don't sugarcoat too much. Confidence is key, okay, but not arrogance. So sometimes what we might perceive in our cultures to be, you know, as a quiet confidence, here might be perceived as being shy. So again, bring yourself to the table, be assertive, be authentic, and at the end of the day, your skills should speak for you, okay? So that's it. That's our presentation for today. I know it was quite long, so thank you for bearing with me, and I hope that you guys learned something. The stage is open for questions. For those of you, you know, who need to go or need to leave, feel free to leave. For those of you who want to stay and chat, ask questions, feel free. Would love your feedback as well. You can include it in the chat. And that's it.
I have a question about when they ask you about what you know about the company. Like if you're applying for a high profile company that you know did some things aren't that great or were involved in projects that were criticized, you probably shouldn't touch on that when.
No, yeah, this isn't an opportunity to, you know, highlight the company's mistakes or misdoings. They're basically asking you whether you know about the company's activities and, you know, productive activities. Yes. But also, you know, if the misdoings are very fishy or not kosher, ask yourself whether this is a company you want to work for.
I have a few questions,
yes.
but I don't want to take away other people's airtime. So maybe if other people do, then I'm happy to go after.
Anybody else with some questions before Natalie? Oh, I see there's a question on the chat. Oh, okay, great. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you share some websites or places to look for listings for jobs in English?
So they're actually not in English. The ones that I know, they're in Hebrew, but you know, they just list the position and the years of experience. So you can totally Google Translate. I could share them with you guys now if you want to chat. Just
okay. But if
I'll
it's
do it at the
listed in
end.
Hebrew, you probably expect us to speak Hebrew for those jobs, right?
No.
No.
The job boards are high-tech companies. High-tech totally accepts people that speak in English as well. They're more global environments. It really depends on the company. But I could tell you in ITC as well, our students are completely international. Some of them don't know a word of Hebrew, and they get accepted to these tech jobs regardless. Really depends on your field.
So are there any places to look for solely English speaking jobs? I know there's like a Facebook group, English jobs, and something like that. Anything else that you know of?
Yeah, there's Nefesh B'Nefesh, the job board. There's Secret Tel Aviv. There's a lot of jobs there for English speakers, and also like look at the job descriptions.
Okay.
And a lot of Facebook groups as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Hi, I'm Gilly.
Hello.
Just curious on your thoughts about urgency of hiring compared to other cultures. I'm getting the vibe that if they want you to start quick, within a week, within a few days even. That's very different to where I come from. Is that very apparent to you here, generally speaking, of the country?
Yeah, I do think that, things happen here very, very quickly. But again, it really depends on the position. Some positions, are either maternity leave and with the option of continuing long term, or some positions are very discreet and, the person will continue with the company for a while until they hire you. It really, really depends. But yes, I think Israelis are quite reactive and they're looking for things quite quickly. What field are you in?
I'm in sport management and also banking. So I've got multi options available. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, depends. But also recruiters are aware that, often people need to give a 30 days notice to their companies or over 30 days. So there is that leeway for sure.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Natalie, I think the stage is open.
Yeah, okay, great. First question. Is it better, would you say, like if you wanted to try and network with someone in a company or know more about it or pass your CV, would you suggest trying to network with someone who works in that field or someone who's working within HR in the company?
So if you have somebody working in that field, I think it's great because sometimes it's good to bypass HR. There are some HR people that are a bit too much of gatekeepers and are looking, for a cookie cut portfolio or CV. So, if you're looking for a marketing position and you're familiar with someone in the marketing department who can vouch for you and knows that you have chops, they might be, a stronger convincing power. But if you know someone both from HR and both from marketing, try them both. As many people as you can to help push you forward.
Okay, great. And if you're going into like a new industry that maybe this is not where your experience lies, or even if you have some experience that's transferable, it's a pretty new kind of role or industry for you. Firstly, would you kind of expect to kind of drop in role? So let's say I was a management position in something previously, would you expect to kind of drop to an entry level or sort of so low, even though you have other transferable skills? And also if you, this might be a separate question, but if you don't have exactly the skills or experience that a company is kind of advertising within a job description, but you've got some of it, or it's something that you really kind of feel strongly about, would you suggest kind of talking up some of your experience or being honest, or kind of how to go about that? Because if you, or maybe even kind of saying, right, well, I don't have the experience, but I'd love to kind of do something with you or know what I should be doing to get it, because it's difficult if you don't have that experience to get it and apply for what you want to be doing.
Right. Really good questions. Also, Natalie, just out of curiosity, what's your field?
I was working previously in a few things, but market research for hotels in a client services management role, which also I ended up kind of like chairing our social committee, and the thing that, and now I've just done a Masa program in teaching English, which is totally unrelated. And I kind of knew before coming out here that I wanted to actually go into maybe something in HR to do with like people engagement kind of specialist roles and things like that.
Okay. So to answer your first question, yeah, I think that, when you're venturing off to a completely new field, there should be that willingness to start from a junior role, because I think there's probably, the recruiter sees it there's probably a lot of things that you'll have to learn and you're starting from scratch, even if you do have those managerial skills that might be transferable. But yes, usually, and I could tell you from our students as well, we have people who are computer scientists and PhDs and have worked in many fields, but when we bring them into the market, they start off as junior developers because they've never done it before. So yeah, you should be willing to do it, but I think that given your professional expertise, you'll be able to climb the ranks fairly quickly compared to someone who's straight off from university and who has no work experience.
What would you expect that kind of quickly to look like? Are we talking sort of months or?
I think it really depends on how quickly you're able to demonstrate your added value and competitive advantage to the company.
But they're not so kind of, I don't know, official kind of in Israel, right?
Right, it's really not official, which is to your advantage. If you're taking on new initiatives and bringing up new ideas and new ways of doing things, it can happen quite quickly. So there's various components that are important to consider. But if you really want to get into a field, then yeah, sometimes you have to start from bottom.
And then the side on not quite having the experience they want, but still kind of wanting to apply, would you just not recommend doing that, or trying to have a conversation with them around sort of, I don't know, work experience or something else?
So you can definitely, frame your experience in a way that's more favorable. I wouldn't lie about experience that you don't have. You can always try to have a conversation, but I think, having people that can vouch for you, having that protectia and people who know people would be the wisest way to go here, especially for a field that you don't have as much experience, because you want to get noticed, but the only way to do it is if somebody can push you along.
Yeah. Okay.
And feel free to sometimes, call the recruiter, call the person and just say, hey, this is me. And I wanted to introduce myself. Like, it's very common here. And I have to say that as someone who's worked many years in recruiting, even if it's not the best fit, I really appreciate it. And I remember those people if something else opens up. Because it shows you have some chutzpah, basically.
Yep. I think that's kind of it for now.
Okay, cool.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, so somebody asked a question about following up with the interviewer if you're waiting for an answer. Some countries love or almost expect you to do this, but in other countries they hate it and find it annoying. Okay, so just so you know, legally, an interviewer does need to get back to you, even in this country, within a certain amount of time. I forget what it is exactly. It's okay, if you haven't heard from them in a week or two and you've come into their office to face-to-face interview to say, just following up on the process and that you want to know where it stands. It's totally fine. I wouldn't email every day and I wouldn't annoy them. And unfortunately, if they're not getting back to you or they're not being very forthcoming, you'll get the drift. I've also been asked about thank you notes. A lot of times, in North America, it's common to write an email and say, hi, thank you for taking the time to interview me. It's less common in this country, but I always suggest that you do it because it shows that you're really interested and you're serious. Okay, another question about cover letters. Right, so this is a big one. Cover letters aren't very popular in Israel. Again, this country is all about tachlis and they don't want to read a whole page about your experience. They'll just look over your CV. What you can do when you email your CV, just write very short 1 to 3 sentences about your background to try to get noticed, but no need for a huge cover letter unless it's required, but less common here. Okay, another question in the chat. No, that was the question. Never mind. Anybody else?
All right, can you also write the, you know, you said there were a couple of companies that have the pay and then also that Israeli job board. Do you mind just writing those in the chat?
Sure, I'll write it in the chat.
Thank you.
Okay, so job boards. Okay, so salary tables.
Just so you know, you replied privately to me, so no one else will be able to see that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I just noticed that. And also, if you have the, you said there was an Israeli one as well. Not that a lot of us can read it, but like you said, it's Google Translate.
The salary boards are Israeli, meaning they have the. 1 minute. Sorry, this didn't come out very organized. Right, so the salary boards are in Hebrew, meaning they have the name of the position, years of experience in Hebrew, but you can definitely take the position, Google Translate, and try to gauge what it is. And the job boards, okay, so Nefesh B'Nefesh and Secret Tel Aviv are in English.
I thought you said there was one job board in Hebrew that you were telling a pretty good question about. Maybe that was a job board.
Well, there are many job boards in Hebrew, which I can include here as well. Also, the classic ones, LinkedIn and Glassdoor, are also very good for Israel as well, just so you know. Okay, just a second. Okay, job boards in Hebrew, there's Ushim. There's all jobs. Yeah, these are the main ones. I'm still a huge advocate for Facebook groups. I think that they're much better than some of the Israeli job boards. Are you guys familiar with some of the Facebook groups? Right, so there's some field specific ones and then there's some general ones as well. And I highly recommend the field specific ones. Like figure out what are the groups that are really popular in your field.
What would you say is the best way to finding those groups, especially if they're in Hebrew?
Good question. Yeah, you'd have to ask people. I can also share some with you if I know, like depending on your field.
I might, yeah, if you don't mind, I might ask you that separately. So
yeah,
if you have like
another way to do it is find out what your field is in Hebrew and just search it and find those groups. Like find the keywords. Sometimes there's some fields that have different names, like in HR, for example, there's human resources, there's recruitment, there's sourcing, and find out all those words in Hebrew and just search them.
You gave right at the beginning, you had an email address. Is that like your personal one? Where like
it's not my personal one. It's the ITC information one, but I will share my personal one as well.
Great, thank you. I did warn you that I might take up some airtime if I started asking questions.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Read at itc.net. Okay. Okay, another question. Will companies ask people to work from home where possible, or do you think that office work will continue as normal in the next couple of months? Okay, first of all, I think this is also very field specific. I think people in high tech often have that flexibility of working from home, and it really depends on the company culture. There's some companies that are totally cool with it. I can tell you that in my company, working from home wasn't very popular, but then Corona came, and then our CEO realized that, wow, we can do this. And if people need to work from home after Corona is over, here and there, totally fine. So I really think it depends on the company and the culture. Okay. Okay, great. So we're good. More questions? Great. So nice to see you.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure meeting you, and best of luck in the search.
Thank you.
Bye.